already packing. Come with me, I'm not really asking. We'll get away to a place where we don't know. About to see the world in action, what we can be, life with no distractions. We'll get away, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out. Die with my own doubts. Be free with me. Let's be free with me. Not looking back, eyes on the freeway, Bonnie and Clyde, a classic cliche. We're on the run, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out. Die with my own doubts. Be free.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this latest, our fourth A-Level Law Revision Blast. And it's a pleasure to welcome our three presenters for tonight. Oh, by the way, I'm Jim. I'm sat here at TTDO HQ. And top left, we've got Liz. Top right, we've got Gemma, which by process of elimination means bottom right, about to give us a big wave, it's Dan. Or Daniel. Daniel, if he's in trouble. And this is our fourth. It's on general defences, and the only note I've got here is that in all the answers to the question, not one of them is the correct answer. No comment. You need to have a go. And if you're with us live, and we're now live on YouTube as well as Facebook Live, for all the oldies on Facebook, of course, you get a chance to respond live to the activities. So it could be a multiple choice question. It could be some clues about a case. It could be all kinds of stuff. But use the live chat or the comments box so that Gemma and Liz and Dan can see what you're saying. That's the option if you're live. But there's a lot of time pressure because we go through these activities pretty quickly. If you're joining us on catch-up or replay after the event, after live, then of course you can always pause the video. Perhaps you're doing it as a group of students in class. Pause the video, give yourself a bit more time because we're under time pressure. Looking like we've got lots and lots of people with us live tonight, which is great. Dan, are you kicking off?
I am indeed kicking off, yes.
Do you want to give us a quick overview as to what we're going to cover and then dive straight in? Go for it.
Absolutely. So we're going to cover various defences such as duress, self-defence and the general defences today. We're going to start with the first activity, and this is going to be a big reveal. And what you need to do is work out the cases. So can you work out what is hidden behind the question mark before all of the clues are revealed? So next slide, please, Jim. So this case, the first clue is the case concerned duress by threats. So if you think of any famous cases about duress by threats, you can pop it in the comments box. You can pause this video. You can see if you can guess that case first. So who's going to be the first to guess the case? Okay, the second one. It was heard in 1982. Okay, if you guessed the video, can you please pop your comment in the box? So it was heard in 1982. Next clue, please, Jim. This case involved a violent man named Mr. King, who was the defendant's homosexual lover. So we've got Samson, who's in year 12, not quite done the defence of duress yet. Of course, it is normally covered in the second year of any course. You'll find this in textbooks and what have you in the second year textbooks. Number 4, please, Jim. Okay, the defendant and Mr. King killed the victim, who was actually the defendant's wife, by strangling her with a wire. Okay, if you do remember, if you know that case, pop it in the box. Okay, the final clue, please, Jim. Okay, duress by threats failed, and this indeed confirmed the 2-part test for duress. Absolutely a pleasant way to go, yes. So if you do know the case, you can pause this if you are watching a recap or a replay. If you know this case, put it in. Okay then, right, let's reveal the case. It is indeed Graham. Okay, so this Graham confirmed that 2-stage test. Okay, you know the 2-stage test concerned, was the defendant compelled to act as he or she reasonably believed? He or she had to and had good cause to fear serious injury or death. They have to have a genuine belief. And if this first test is satisfied, would a sober person of reasonable firmness, sharing the characteristics of the accused, have responded in the same way? And indeed, the relevant characteristics must go to the ability to resist those pressure and threats. The threat here was pulling the wire. Now, the second test failed here. The defendant's will to resist a threat was eroded through drink or drugs, and that was not taken into account. We need to remember it needs to be, would a sober person act in the same way? Okay, thank you, Jim. Next activity. In this activity, you have 60 seconds, or if you need longer, if you're on the replay, you have 60 seconds to separate 8 key phrases at the bottom of the screen into 3 categories. So we have duress by threats, duress by circumstance, or both. Okay, so it's either a case or a fact. We have threat of death or serious injury, cannot be claimed for murder or attempted murder, the situation made the crime necessary, fails to deal with voluntary association with criminals, considers how the sober person of reasonable firmness would act, it must be an immediate threat, and then we have 2 cases, Martin and Valderrama Vega. You have 60 seconds when the timer starts, and Jim is going to start that timer now. Don't forget to put those comments in the box. Five seconds left. Indeed, suitably threatening music. I often use that music to signify we're going into battle. Ellie Robertson, so you comments there. Both you got 2, 4, 6, 2, 4, 5, 6, 8 in both. Threats number 1, the circumstances number 3. I tell you, you're not far wrong at all. Okay, so if you need more time, you can pause this video now. If you're with us live, Jim is about to reveal the answers. Excellent. So, indeed, we have number 6, Valderrama Vega. Remember, this is a case in which the defendant imported cocaine due to death threats by an OCG, or organised criminal gang. A little line of duty reference there. I guess if you know, you know. The threats to disclose his homosexuality also, and financial pressures. Now, taken together, the defence could be used, the defensive threats could be used, but the threat of death was considered important. And of course, we got considers how the sober person of reasonable firmness would act, being the second part of the Graham test. Now, the case of Martin, you may remember this case in your studies, not the same as the famous homicide case or defence case. We have applied the two-stage Graham test, but the defendant's wife here threatened suicide unless the defendant drove her son to work. Her son was late and was about to, or at least at risk of losing his job, and the defendant drove whilst disqualified. Now, in this case, points to the number 7 there, the situation here made the crime necessary. Again, that threat of death or serious injury was applicable. And of course, both these elements of threat of death or serious injury must be applicable for both. They both cannot be claimed for attempted murder or murder confirmed if you look at studies in the case of Howe and of Gotts. And it must be an immediate threat, shown in the perjury case of Hudson and Taylor, if you want to further your studies there. And of course, that final element. And number 2, it fails due to voluntary association with criminals, outlined in Sharp and confirmed in the famous case of Zed, or later Hassan, 2005, when he did indeed leave himself open to threats. Okay, well done, particularly to Ellie there with the responses so far. And we're now going to hand over to Liz.
That's great. Thank you very much. So I'm going to now take you through 2 activities which are going to focus upon the defence of self-defence, but equally these answers apply to self-defence or defence of another and prevention of crime. So self-defence and prevention of crime are 2 separate defences contained in separate places. However, the principles for these 2 defences for your A-level purposes are largely the same. So the first activity is a chili quiz. So we're going to, on the next slide in a second, show, here we go, 3 questions. And you have got, I think it's 30 seconds, to answer as many questions as you can. So the number of chilies identifies how hard that question is. So try and aim for, if you can, answering all 3 in the time, which we will start now. Slightly less threatening music. So 30 seconds. Liz might be a bit generous and give you a few more, possibly. So first question, what is the outcome if self-defense is successful? So if the defendant who is seeking to rely upon self-defense is actually successful in establishing that, then what will the outcome of the trial be? List an example case for self-defense. See if you can list as many as you can think of. There's quite a few case authorities for self-defense. And then the third hot question is define the test for self-defense. So as a little bit of a clue there are 2 parts to the test. So pop your answers into the chat if you're with us live. If you're watching this on replay, then obviously pause it, have a discussion. You can have a competition about who can list the most cases within a specified time period. So fantastic answers coming through. We will have a look at the answers to these questions now. So the first question is, what is the outcome if self-defense is successful? So the outcome of a successful use of self-defense is an acquittal. So self-defense is what we call a complete defense. So a complete defense means that if it is successful, then the defendant is not found guilty of the crime. They are acquitted. There is no liability. That's distinct from a partial defence, like like voluntary manslaughter, loss of control, diminished responsibility, where they're partial in the sense that they actually just reduce the defendant's conviction. They lower the conviction to a less serious offence. However, with self-defence, there is a full acquittal, which means that Although strangely with self-defense, the defendant is pleading a defense but inadvertently admitting the act, but it's kind of a defense related to motive because they're saying I did it because I was defending myself. So even though they are admitting the acts, their purpose was self-defense, the court recognised that and therefore they're not guilty at all. They have a complete acquittal. So I think Ellie put that one in. So does Samson. Well done. So, list a case example for self-defense. There are lots of really good case examples for you to refer to. We've had some good answers in there from Samson and Ellie, so thank you very much. Cases that I would point you in the direction of would be Palmer is a really good case for self-defense. Palmer was the leading case for self-defense and establishes many of the key principles. Many of the key principles for self-defense which were established in Palmer were actually then kind of pulled out of Palmer and put into the Criminal Justice and Immigration Act 2008, specifically Section 76, which consolidates the principles of self-defense. It doesn't necessarily replace the common law ones, but rather it puts it onto a statutory footing. And they actually took many of the principles of Palmer and put it within the statute. So you've got Palmer, which is a really significant case. Williams is a really significant case in terms of considering the first part of the self-defense test, which relates to our answer in question 3. So there's a two-part test for self-defense. So one, did the defendant honestly believe that force was necessary? That's an objective test. And the case of Williams is really significant because it tells us it's a subjective test, apologies. So it's a subjective test, and the case of Williams tells us that test is so subjective that actually the defendant can rely upon the defence if they genuinely believe that force was necessary, even if it was mistaken, even if that mistake was possibly not as reasonable as it could be, provided there is a genuine mistake and a genuine belief that force is necessary, even if it was not, the defendant is able to rely upon the defence. The only exception is if they are mistaken because they're voluntarily intoxicated, in which case the law is not so lenient. The second part of the test is then, was the force used reasonable? And this is an objective test. So what that means is it's determined by the perception of the reasonable man. Would the reasonable man objectively say that the force was reasonable in response to the circumstances as D believed them to be? So you've got a subjective and an objective test in order to determine whether self-defense is available. So fantastic answers on that one. We're now going to move on to the second self-defense activity. So this is a picture grid. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through 6 questions. And as we reveal the questions, if you are on live, then you can comment in the chat. Samson's just added the force needs to be proportionate. Well done. That's a very good point. So in that second part of the test where we say, was the force used reasonable, we use a test of proportionality to determine if it is reasonable or not. So well done, Samson. Definitely reference that in any question that you're going to answer on self-defense. So we will reveal the question, and then you can pop your answers into the chat, and then after we've revealed the question we will show part of an image, and that part of an image will lead to, as we reveal them all, to show the whole image, which links to a self-defense case. There was an added bonus. You can see if you can identify that case at the end. So we will go through the first question. So what statute covers self-defense? So I have given you a bit of a hint to this one already, so hopefully you can pop the answers in the chat. We have got, because the defence of self-defence originated within the common law, we have got Palmer as our key common law authority and lots of other really useful authorities which we can refer to, but the law was consolidated to an extent and updated and put into a statute. So if you think you know that statute, you can pop it into the chat. Those of you who are really aspiring for kind of higher grades or higher mark answers might want to also learn the specific section numbers. So Samson's put the Criminal Law Act. So the Criminal Law Act contains prevention of crime. So Ellie's also given us a suggestion. So if we reveal the answer, The answer is the Criminal Justice and Immigration Act 2008. So it is specifically Section 76 of the Criminal Justice and Immigration Act, which has placed a number of those common law principles upon self-defense and put it onto a statutory footing. Okay, so we can reveal that part of the picture. Okay, so start having a think, oh, what case could this possibly relate to do with self-defense? Feel free to, if you think you know, just with the one image, to pop it in the chat. So what offences can you claim self-defense for? So I pop any answers in the chat. So think about the wide range of offences that you will study within a law A-level. So Ellie's hit the nail on the head quite quickly there, so well done. The answer is, if we can reveal, all crimes. So self-defense, and as is the theme of this session, is a general defence. So that means that it's available to all crimes, and that is distinct from special defences, which are special because they are particular to specific offences. They're only available to particular offences, like diminished responsibility and loss of control are special defences to murder. You can't plead them to anything else. So well done, Ellie. Okay, a little bit more, looks like a bit of grass, a bit of mud. So the next question is, what must the force be for self-defense to be successful? So pop your answers into the chat, or you can pause this and have a really good discussion if you're watching this on replay. Think about keywords, think about key phrases. A bit of a clue, Palmer gave us some really nice phrases which then put on into the statute because they were so well phrased and appropriate. So this relates to the second part of the test. What must the force be for the self-defense to be successful? So Ellie, you've obviously done all your revision. I'm very impressed with your answers. If we reveal the answer, it is the force must be reasonable and proportionate. So well done, Ellie. So it must be reasonable. And reasonableness, it actually refers to in the statute as something is not reasonable in the circumstances as the defendant believed them to be if it was disproportionate in those circumstances. So what you are assessing and discussing and speculating about in an application question, if you're applying self-defense, is was the amount of force used proportionate in relation to the circumstance defendant believe them to be. And the statute gives us some really nice guidance about how do you consider that. So they tell us things like, if the defendant has acted honestly and instinctively, that's good evidence that what they're doing is reasonable. And they also recognise that, and I really like this phrase, the defendant cannot weigh to a nicety the exact measure of his defensive action, which is a bit of a mouthful. However, what it means is that the law recognises that in that really intense, high-intensity situation where someone has to feel the need to use force to protect themselves, actually a defendant might not be able to make a really objective assessment precisely about how much force is necessary, but they recognise that. So if we reveal, so we've got a little bit more here about thinking about what cases could relate to. So the next question is, true or false, a defendant cannot strike first for self-defense to succeed. So this one's really nice and easy in terms of popping in the chat. You can just put true or false. So a defendant cannot strike first for self-defense to succeed. And this is often a really interesting discussion with A-level students and within any academic study of self-defense. Ellie and Samson have both gone false. So thinking about actually, Ellie's referenced a case, very well done. So actually thinking about, if you strike the first blow, how can you plead self-defense? Because presumably you've then started the altercation. So if we reveal the answer is false, and absolutely you were right, Ellie, as in the case of Bird. So really logically, the defence of self-defence can't operate on the basis that a defendant can't strike the first blow, because if the method of attack against the defendant is someone with a gun, it's unreasonable to expect a defendant to wait to be shot in order to defend themselves. So we've got the case of Bird, which is a really nice authority that demonstrates to us that what's called a preemptive strike, striking in anticipation of the attack, doesn't prevent self-defense being available. So we can reveal the next part of the image. Can a defendant claim self-defense if they were mistaken? So I have already given you a bit of a clue on this one, touched upon this one. So you can put yes or no in the chat. So if we reveal the answer to this one is yes, they can. So well done, Ellie. As we said, in the case of Robert, I just read your name there, sorry, Ellie. Well done, Samson. As in the case of Williams, yes, you can rely upon a mistaken belief in the need to use force because that first part of the test is subjective. So we can reveal the next part of the picture. Okay, last one. The case will be Williams. Well done, Samson. A defendant does not need to attempt to retreat for self-defense to succeed. Okay, so popping true or false into the chat again if you're watching it live, or equally pause it if you're on replay, or try and maybe write the answers down on a bit of paper, and then you can tick or cross whether you got it right. So Ellie has said true. What do we think? The answer is, if we reveal the answer, true. So this was also part of the ratio, part of the outcome in Bird, that if a defendant is in a situation, and I always find it quite strange saying defendant because they've been attacked and they're defending themselves, but they are the defendant because they're getting prosecuted for their actions. If the defendant is in a situation where they can choose to defend themselves or try and run away as quickly as they can, presumably, the law doesn't expect you to run away. You are not under a duty to retreat. And that's actually was placed onto a statutory footing in the Criminal Justice and Immigration Act as well. So if we reveal the last part of the picture, so this would appear to be a farm. So can anybody tell us the name of a case, a very significant self-defense case which involved a farm? So have a little think about a case where a defendant tried to use self-defense in order to protect his farm and his farmhouse, and may or may not have been able to rely upon it. Lots of answers coming through in the chat. So if we reveal the answer is the case of R.V. Martin. So well done to those of you that got that. Martin's a really interesting self-defense case for many reasons. He is in a very short overview. I'm sure most of you have already are familiar with the case, but Martin lived on a very dilapidated old farm. He'd been burgled lots of times. He was burgled by two burglars, one aged 16, one aged 30, and he shot them both, and he killed one of them by shooting them in the back as they were running away. He sought to rely upon self-defense, but that was rejected at the trial, and he was convicted of murder on the basis that his force was so excessive. He sought to appeal and establish that he had paranoid personality disorder, and one of his grounds of appeal was that he sought to kind of argue that that should be relevant in determining whether objectively the force was reasonable. His many grounds of appeal were rejected, but because he had the paranoid personality disorder, at appeal his conviction was substituted for one of manslaughter upon the grounds of diminished responsibility. So super well done for all of those answers, very impressive, and I will now pass you over to Gemma for the final activities.
Okay, so some brilliant answers we've already had in. Let's keep it up. Okay, so the first activity I'm going to take you through is this bubble quiz. So the number of answers that are correct can range from 0 to all 4, and you have to identify the correct answers to the following questions. So let's have the first question then. What must the threat be for duress by threats? So let's have a look. Which do you think is the correct answer there? Is it A, B, C, D? It can be a combination of any up to 4, or it could be none. Okay, so pop your answers in the chat there, okay? Or if you're at home watching it on replay catch up, you can pause it and come up with your own answers. What you can do as well is you can think of any cases which support why you think each of these answers is correct. So Ellie's going for A, B, and D. Okay, let's have a look at any other answers that are coming in. And then let's go to the big reveal. Oh, that was a tricky one to start with, wasn't it? It's all of them. Okay, so A, immediate. The threat must be immediate. Okay, in that case of Hassan, which has already been mentioned, there's a quote there that says immediacy is the cardinal feature of the defence. The threat must be aimed at the defendant or somebody to whom they are responsible for. In the case of Martin, it was the defendant's wife. If you remember, in the case of Conway, it was passengers in the defendant's car. And in Hassan, they said it could be any person to whom the defendant would regard themselves as responsible for. The threat must also be specific, and the threat must be to cause death or serious injury. It can't be to include threats to property, as we've seen in Lynch. It can't be to expose adultery in Singh. It can't be for severe pain, as in Quayle, and it can't be for psychiatric harm, seen in Baker and Wilkins. So all of those are correct there. Right, so let's go to question 2. So what characteristics can be attributed to the sober person of reasonable firmness for duress by threats? Which are the correct answers? It could be more than one, or it could be none. Pop your answers in the chat there. These are very much like the questions you could actually get if you're doing the AQA spec for your A-level, or, you know, they're good revision for any A-level board. Okay, let's have a look at the answers. We've got some answers in. Let's go for the big reveal. Yes. Okay. All those characteristics will be taken into account, not low IQ, as was seen in the case of Bowen. Okay, well done for the people who got that correct there. Now, I think this one we might have already have a clue on. This might have been covered already. Which of the general defences have been consolidated into an Act of Parliament? A, B, C, D. Which have been consolidated into an Act of Parliament. Let's talk about this before, saying they did start off in common law and then they were consolidated. And I think a couple of you answered this question correctly, if I remember. So let's have a go. Type your answer in, or if you're at home watching it and catch up, you can always pause. Let's go for the big reveal. It is A, yes. I think Liz mentioned this before. It's the Criminal Justice and Immigration Act 2008, Section 76. Okay. 4th question, please. The test for self-defence is what? A, B, C, or D? Subjective and objective? Could that possibly be correct? Is it subjective only? Objective only? Which of those could possibly be the correct answer there? Let's go for the reveal of. We've got a few conflicting answers in here. Oh, right, okay. Let's go. Yes. It's subjective and objective, okay? It brings the two elements together in the test, and of course, it's left up to the jury to decide. Okay, and this is the last question we've got. Which of the following defences are classed as partial defences? Duress by threats, necessity, self-defence, or duress by circumstance, which is a partial defence. 1, 2, 3, 4, or none of them? Type your answer in the chat box. Have a think about all those different defences that you've studied. What will happen when they are used in court, or they lead to a partial defence? Thank you very much for all the answers coming in. You guys are on fire tonight. Okay, let's have a look. None are correct. You see, catch you out there. None. All of those will lead to a full acquittal. Okay, so as we go into the last quiz that we've got this evening, it's a 30-second challenge. It's quite snappy. Okay, you've got to be quite quick. It's a bit like fastest finger first. Okay, so what you have to do, you have 30 seconds to answer the question on the screen. How many general defence cases can you remember? Write your cases in the chat. Okay, 3, 2, 1, go. How many can we get? I love doing these sort of things in lessons and seeing students writing away as if their life depends on it. Let's have a see. We've got some coming in. Keep going. Some of you might remember from tonight. Okay, yeah, there's loads there. I mean, we could be here all night going through them all. We've got some on duress. We've got Hassan there. That's been mentioned. About immediacy being the cardinal feature of the defence. There's other duress cases there. There's obviously the Graham test, which sets a 2-part test for duress, which has been mentioned. We've got cases such as Martin saying the threat can be to the defendant's wife. So there's lots of duress cases there, and well done for mentioning them in the chat box. And then in relation to self-defence, I think we've already had quite a few mentioned already. We've had Beckford and Bird, Williams. We've got, I think somebody's mentioned there the Martin case. Oh, that was somebody at tutor to you. Well done. Been listening well there, I can see. So that's really good. Try and remember all those cases, okay, for your upcoming assessments and exams.
Superb. There were loads, weren't there? Loads of cases. I had to go as well, but I was cheating. I just mentioned the one that Dan mentioned right at the start. I suppose it proves I was listening, doesn't it?
It does. Well done. It does.
That's fantastic. It's only 35 minutes, but we've absolutely whistled through some great stuff there on general defences. And what I love also is there's some really nice explanation and a bit more background and more detail rather than just the answers, which is really useful from a revision point of view. Hopefully, if you've been joining us live, you found it useful too. If you did, give the session a thumbs up. We never take that for granted, but we really do appreciate it if you do, because it helps spread the word about these types of sessions. We're planning our next few sessions, including some Year 12 focused content as we move towards the end of the school year, and then some more sessions when we come back. So best thing to do is to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you'd like to get an alert when Dan and Liz and the rest of the team are joining us. It'll be a different team each time. So it could be Gemma, it could be Dan, it could be Sarah, it could be all kinds of people who put these, who present these sessions. Great team we're building here. If you're watching on replay, hopefully you enjoyed it too. And for now, from all three of us, we'll say all the best with your revision, and we'll see you soon. Cheers.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.